Okay, good afternoon and welcome to today's webinar. Actually, it's a lunch and learn. It's a 30-minute lunch and learn on the Strive process checkup, something that we recommend that all districts look at toward the end of the year. My name is Paige Parker and I'm part of the training and implementation team. And I'll be walking you through this process today, this little checkup that we're going to do. As we go through today's lunch and learn, if you want to post questions, you can do that in the question. There's a Q&A button that you can use to post questions and we will respond. I will try to respond to them during the lunch and learn, but if not, I will get back to you after the fact. And if you have questions about topics other than today's topic, if you have questions about anything else, please feel free to email those to training@eduphoria.net and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. All right, today's agenda will be looking at your process, or actually I'm going to use a sample process, but talking about what you would want to look at in reviewing your process, adding or editing templates, checking tags and options, and then we'll talk about the new t-pess and new t-tess that is available for you to use. So let's start with reviewing your process. There are several parts to the process. I like to say this is the how's that working for you section, because you want to look at what happened this year, what went well, what were your pain points, and what do you want to do about those. So I'm going to jump over to the application and look at frameworks first of all. And I just want to clarify a few things about frameworks when I go into the settings. My frameworks are here, and I have 5 in this demo site. You may have fewer, you may have 4 at this point, or you may have more if you have created some for your district. The frameworks are needed to tie elements together over time. So for example, in t-tess and t-pess, where teachers and principals have goals that they write at the beginning of the year, they have some walkthroughs, observations, or in the principal's case, a middle of the year evaluation. They have some documents that happen throughout the year, and then at the end of the year, they have a summative that ties all of that together. In order to tie it all together, it has to be linked in some way. So in the case of t-tess, it's linked by the t-tess framework. Everything is tagged to these dimensions, and that pulls everything together at the end. If you have an employee group that does not have multiple steps that have to be tied together, they get what I call the once and done evaluation. They have one document, it happens one time a year, and that's all. They don't need a framework because nothing has to be linked together or tied to get data that compares or sums it all up. You don't need that for that one-time evaluation, so you don't have to have a framework. So I'm going to go back a slide here and say that you do not need a framework for every appraisee type. You don't need an appraisee type for every template. Those things they work together, but they're separate. So you need to look at your frameworks and determine what appraisee types do I have that require a framework because they have multiple steps that we're going to tie together in that summative where I can see all of the data for the whole year. If you have some other groups other than what you have here, you can create a new framework. One thing that may be new if you haven't peeked in a while is that everybody now has the new t-pess framework that takes effect this coming August of 2021. They have created a new rubric for both principals and assistant principals. The framework is the same for both, but on the individual criteria for the documents, there are some differences. So both of your assistant principals and principals will use the same framework just as they did before, but they will have different documents this time around. So these have been pushed out by us. We have the framework created for you, and you'll notice that it is locked. And so you can't edit that framework. We locked these two because we are working on some things that will give you some good data information, and we want to keep that integrity. So these 2 new frameworks have been locked. You also have the t-scess framework, which is for counselors. It's the school counselor system. It also, I believe, is effective starting in August. It came from Lone Star, which is the state counselors group, not from the TEA. So you might want to check with your district to find out if you will be using t-scess. But if you are, the framework is there and the documents are there. So we've created that for you, and I'll show you in a little bit how to find those documents and bring them into your process. Let me go back. And then I would also like to talk about appraisee types for a little bit, and let's review the appraisee types that you have. You don't want to remove any appraisee types, even if you're making updates or changes to your processes. Leave those in there. You can rename them if you want to move them to the bottom of the list, but don't remove them because there is data associated there, and you don't want you want to always be able to go back and look at that old data that is associated with that appraisee type in that process. You might need to add some new ones, so that's a thing to think about. If you do, you're going to go over to the appraisee types and look at the list. My list is extensively long. I would not expect a district to have nearly this many appraisee types because, again, an appraisee type does not have to be created for each template that you have, only for each process that you have. So, for example, under campus staff, I have a single appraisee type for all of my campus staff that are non-teachers. They don't have a framework because they get that once a year evaluation document. When I click on evaluation and I go to my task, I can scroll down to the bottom and look in my evaluation folder and see that I have teacher aides, campus testing coordinators, my custodian, diagnostician, my librarian, library assistant. They all are in this folder of evaluation documents because they all use this once and done process. So what that looks like for an administrator, I'm going to go to, when I select that evaluation document, I will pick the template based on what this person's job is. So if that is my custodian, I will come down and select the custodian template. If Jimmy is my library assistant, I will pick the library assistant template. So the process is the same for all these different job descriptions, but I will choose the appropriate template based on the person that I'm evaluating. So I don't need to have that appraisee type for each template. I can create one appraisee type for everybody who has that same process, and then add all of the templates in there. So I might have a campus staff, district staff, t-pess, maybe a couple of others, but I don't need to have one like this one is set up for a specific job description. Unless they have some process that's different from everybody else, they probably don't need their own appraisee type. If I'm not going to use one anymore, I might want to rename it and put I usually put a Z at the beginning of it because that makes it go to the bottom of my list. And when the principals are selecting, what they see is up at the top. So I like to put an asterisk at the ones that my campus principals are going to use because they do the majority of the selecting, the majority of the evaluations. They have the largest number of people, and so I want them to see theirs at the top. Again, what that means for the administrators is when they go to select somebody, for example, this person is not set. So when I go to select them, what I see at the top of the list of methods to choose are the ones that apply to those district campus appraisers. I see those at the top of the list. Then I can scroll down to any of my others, but the ones we're not using are going to be down at the bottom. So those are just things that I like to do to make it easier on the administrators to find the correct evaluation method that they need to use. Joel created a Strive checklist several years ago that I think is great information, so I wanted to share it as part of this Lunch and Learn. I have a link that I shortened up at the top. If you want to find it, it's a bit.ly link, eduphoria-strive-checklist, or you can go into our help, go to Strive for administrators, and you'll find an item in there that says Strive Setup Checklist. And so I'm going to open that up and just talk about it a little bit. It goes through all of the steps that you might want to put into your process of reviewing Strive each year. And one of the things we recommend is having a meeting and bringing all the people involved. So you may have some people from human resources, some from your professional development team. You might have some appraisers, some instructional technology people in that group who can come together and talk about what their needs are and what their pain points were as you're making these decisions. Also, on these sections, we've got links in there to articles in our online help section that will help you figure out how to do some of the things that you need to do here. So if you do decide as a team in this meeting that you're going to modify some of the frameworks or create a new framework for one of your appraisal groups, there is a link to the article there about how to do that. But then it walks you through updating the templates, which we're going to look at in just a second, updating appraisal types if you need to do that, uploading any reference documents. I just talked with the district this morning that needed to add a reference document so that administrators could see the same thing that the teachers are seeing in their reflections documents before they get submitted to them. So you can create reference documents so that everybody can see all the pieces of the process. Then any district appraisal documentation can also be put in there as reference documents. And then what are you going to do for training? If you've made any changes, is that going to require training for your teachers or for your appraisers? And then making sure that you sign up for alerts and get all the information from us. So it's a pretty thorough checklist. And again, I put the link in there, and you can also find it in our online help section. So now I want to talk about templates. And I'm going to start at the end instead of at the beginning with what does the data look like when it's coming out of your templates. So on the left side of the screen, I have from Appraisal Analysis a walkthrough document where there are check boxes. So that's what this type of document is going to look like in the data. I know it's tiny, but at the beginning of each of the criteria, there is a number. So these first four have the number 5, which stands for distinguished. These have a 4, which is for accomplished, a 3 for proficient, and then if the whole document was showing, you would see my 2s and my 1s. So that's how the check boxes are set up. If I check off different criteria, I might have 2 things that I checked for teacher that are at the distinguished level, and I might have checked 1 or 2 things at the accomplished level to get their overall numbers. When I'm looking at the data, as compared to what I see on the right, which is observation data, this is a matrix question, and so it's going to display in this sideways bar chart, and I can see the percentages. If I was live, I would also be able to see the numbers when I float over these bars. It would show me a number that's in there. If I'm comparing a checkbox question to a matrix question, it's kind of like apples and oranges, but I could say these are all 5s, so I could add up, do the math on my percentages or on my numbers, and then compare it with my distinguished over here. That's a little extra work that I have to do, so that's something to think about when you're creating your documents. Do you want to have documents, what are you comparing and what is the data going to look like? So that's one thing to think about. And then what are you getting out of your templates right now? Are you getting the data out that you want to get? So I'm going to go in and let me check and see if I'll miss. No. So I want to go in and look at adding and editing those templates. So we're going to go to the community and we're going to find some templates to show. I want to point out a couple things about this screen before I go in live. When you go to the eduphoria community to find any templates that are already created, you'll have folders for the different types of documents. So if I'm looking for summative, I'm going to go into the summative. If you don't see it where you think it is, like if you're looking for an evaluation, look in the summative folder too, because you'll notice here that the t-pess assistant principal document and principal document, even though they're called end of year evaluations, we put them in the summative folder so that they have access to the summative panel. They have to be built in that folder in order to have that feature. So even if you're looking for an evaluation document, be sure you look, the folders are based on what they do, the document type, not necessarily the title of the document. Also, if you see an asterisk in the beginning of a document, that's our naming convention. That's something that we put in. Those are documents that we have looked at, proofed, We created them and we made sure that they were tagged so that when you bring them into your system, those tags will be there. And then the last thing I wanted to point out is that there's a little green arrows going in a circle up there. That's the refresh button for the community. And I do recommend that you click that button each time you go in, because if we've added something new, you want to make sure you're seeing the most updated documents that we have out there. So you can just click that refresh and that will give it to you. So I'm going to go in and get to my community. Just to show you that I would go in and find those documents that I'm looking for. If I'm setting up my t-pess process for next year using the new t-pess framework, I'm going to go in and find that t-pess document, and I'm going to click the import button to bring it into my system. Your frameworks are there, and as long as the framework is in existence, when you bring this template in, it's going to be tagged to all of their dimensions so that everything will work on the data side. So you can go in and find any templates that you want from our community and bring them in. Once you have brought in a new template, or even if you have existing templates and you don't think you're getting the data that you want, this is a good time to go in and evaluate. So you can go in and look at, I'm going to go to an observation document, and I want to go to my edit template tab. And I'm going to click on one of the matrix items and go to the rows. And I want to make sure that each one of my elements says dimension 1.1 standards and alignments. If it's not, or whatever dimension I clicked on, if I click on a different row, it will show me I'm in 1.2, so it will show me the dimension that one is tagged to. If it's not tagged, it will say the word dimension and have the colon, but there won't be anything after the colon. And if there's not anything after the colon, that question is not tagged, and so the data won't carry through. So you want to make sure that it's tagged. In order to do that, I would double click on the element or the question itself. I would come down to the bottom where my drop down list is, and I would select the dimension that I want, and then I would click update row. And that's how I would make sure that my document is tagged on each one of those questions. Even if it is not a matrix question, if it's an evidence question, I still want to click on my evidence and make sure that it is tagged to that dimension so that the evidence will show up in the summative panel as well. So you can tag checklist questions, comments questions, matrix questions. All of them should be tagged to the dimension so that that data will show up in the summative panel. And then I also wanted to talk about some template options. This is another good time to look at your templates, how they're working, and whether you have the options you want. So I'm going to go to the template options tab. The defaults are for it to record the start and end times. It will automatically put a start and end time in there for you, and you can adjust that if you want to, or the appraiser can. It defaults to allow the appraiser to make the evaluation viewable. That's part of the process. Until they do that, the staff member can't see or respond to or sign the document. So that's a default. We also have it defaulted to allow them to use it on a mobile device, to record the class if you've got that connected. We have added new fields, and I'll go in and show one of those in just a minute, that ask the appraiser to include the grade level and subject area. They have to pull that in from a drop-down menu. That is for TIA, teacher incentive allotment specifically. They're reporting asks for those two fields. So we have added them to our documents so that you'll have that data in your reports if you are a district that's pursuing TIA. We also have it defaulted to enable the comments by appraiser and appraisee, so they can message back and forth on an evaluation, and that's a good way for teachers to ask questions or for them to be able to state their feelings about an evaluation before it is signed and becomes official. Things that are optional are preventing changes once it's been submitted, only displaying appraisal items to the staff member that's been selected, and then allowing appraisers to lock the instrument, enabling signatures, and displaying numeric scoring values. These last three are the three that are most commonly used by districts. The display numeric scoring values to the appraisees was discouraged originally with t-tess. They did not focus on numbers. They wanted to focus on the individual ratings for each dimension rather than a score for the domain. So that was defaulted to be unchecked, and I usually still leave it unchecked. But for observations and summatives, I do think a lot of districts like to have those signed electronically. In order to sign electronically, you have to enable it on the template itself. So really, electronic signatures have to be turned on in three places: in the management system for the district as a whole, under general options for Strive as an application, and then for each template that you want to include it on. And then the other one I wanted to talk about is allowing appraisers to lock the instrument so that only the appraiser and the staff member can see it. This one is really more important for t-pess than it is for t-tess documents. With t-tess, teachers can never see each other's documents. That's not possible. But depending on the roles and rights that are given to appraisers, they might accidentally be able to see each other's evaluations unless that evaluation is locked. So for t-pess, I do recommend checking allow appraisers to lock the instrument. So there is an article called Set Up the New t-pess Process. And again, there is a video that walks you through that setup, and there are screenshots showing you everything you need. But what I wanted to point out is this right here that tells you all of the documents that you'll need to download from the community and what folder they're in. So you'll go to the community, go to the reflections folder, and find those two documents to bring into your system. And then you can, the video also shows you how to build the process and everything else that you would need to do to set that up. So everything is there for you. We also have help available. If you go to our Strive and settings for administrators, the checklist that I showed you is there. There's also an article for setting up the lock view for administrative appraisals. And there is a section called Updating Evaluation Templates that goes through the tagging and the options that we talked about today. So those articles are there for you if you need help after today. And then also, if you have any final questions, I would be happy to answer those both now, and you can follow up later by emailing us at training@eduphoria.net. Thank you for your time today, and we'll see you next time.